Chapter 7 Security. This chapter is one of the new ones for this edition of the text. There's some really good content in this chapter. However, I would just like to point out to you that, like they do in the chapter, most of the security breaches that we see or have seen in the last few years really come from internal sources. So your internal employees are your biggest threat by far. This figure 35 and gives you an idea of how much time it takes to discover security breaches and when they kind of occur. You can see a lot of them do not happen. You do not identify these at the point of compromise, but discovery happens much later, and being able to deal with that happens even later. So the text in general is outlined fairly well. This security decision framework is based on best practices in our field right now, and just want to point your attention to these 5 areas of a strategy, infrastructure, policy, training, and investments. I don't want to just read the text back to you, but I just want to point out to you that these 5 areas most certainly are filled with good information. Like I said earlier, 80% of breaches are caused by internal sources or stealing passwords. There's lots of different ways to do this, and I'll mention to you a little bit about phishing later on, which is becoming, well, it is more and more of a problem with people not really understanding how to avoid being hooked by these phishing emails and that are constantly coming across our desk. Keylogger hardware and software, obviously, and then just guessing passwords. There's a lot of actually programs out there that will just try a lot of different passwords. That's why we're seeing more and more of people being locked out of systems after like 5 failed attempts, is because they don't want to just be able to allow a program to just run and hard break a password. Estimated cost per breach is, according to the text, between $145 to $154. That might not seem like very much, but remember, this is a estimate average, and so there are some, as you're well aware, probably in the news, big breaches that can result in much higher costs. Obviously, a loss in trust leads to a decline in sales, and there are ways to recoup costs, such as through insurance or other third-party vendors that can help to limit your risk, but those have also ongoing costs. You have to pay the insurance premiums ongoing, and you kind of hope that you never have to use those. Some key concepts underneath those 5 areas of the framework that I want to just point out specifically. First of all, access controls, which includes biometrics. We're seeing a rise in the last few years of the use of biometrics. I personally have a lot of biometrics on my hardware devices. Those of you who have iPhones are now logging into your iPhone just with your thumbprint. These are different ways. However, there's downsides to biometrics as well. I remember a case down in Peru. They were put in finger scanners for their ATM machines in banks to be able to get cash out of your account, and the bad guys were then chopping off people's fingers in order to get access to people's funds. And so, this was in the late 90s. They actually started, or no, it was early 2000s. They actually started removing these biometric scanners from their ATMs because they were losing customers because they were afraid of losing their digits. And so, kind of a unique case where these biometrics had some unintended consequences with some real business consequences. Security policies. Again, I don't want to reread you that content, but it gives you some good advice, and also the SATA section on training helps you understand some principles on the different types of training that can be successful. Phishing emails, as I indicated before, is going to talk about that again. There are a lot of network controls where you can identify these spam emails so that your users don't even get confronted with the decision or the choice to be able to click on these phishing emails or the links that are sent. However, training is a major portion of this. I've been surprised even my own colleagues in the business school here have fallen for these phishing emails because they look so legitimate. And I think training is really one of the biggest ways that we can guard ourselves against these type of breaches. Lastly, this slide actually doesn't come from the text, and so this is really a telecommunications view of the issues that this chapter covers. You can see that not only is strategy and policy an important part of security, but also the hardware and software elements. And so I often think of the issues related to security in this type of a way, trying to identify IT architecture and standards that are most appropriate, IT management, education, you see over there, number 9, but also getting the right hardware and software, which in this figure you can see are labeled 1 through 5, well really 1, 3, 4, and 5, all have hardware and software components. And so when you're building your infrastructure, it's time to start thinking about security. Obviously, risk is associated with that. It might interest you to know that I don't even have a antivirus software on my own personal computer. I rely on my own knowledge to not go to sketchy websites, or I do monitor my own, or the cookies that are placed on my browsers, and I also make sure that I am careful about what kind of attachments and my behavior with email. And so I've accepted, there's 3 ways to deal with risk, right? We can transfer it, like with insurance, right? We can transfer that risk to a third party. We can accept it, and that's what I've done with my virus software on my computer. I try to back up the data, and then if I lose my laptop, that's the risk that I accept, right? Or we can try to invest, right? We can try to minimize the risk that we have by investing in either education or software or hardware solutions to embed inside our systems. And so if we don't want to transfer, or we don't want to accept the risk, then we have no other alternative but to invest into some kind of solution. And that's never going to be done, right? The bad guys are always going to be trying to do more to breach the system. Our employees are always trying to find a way to work around, because of course security is certainly not an enabler, but it frustrates people from time to time. And so a lot of times we feel like the bad guys, like I've been saying, are really the people that should be on our side, that are just not interested in security. Anyway, I do think that security is one of those things that we don't think about, which is good. We don't want to have to think about it, but we don't think about it until it's too late, and then we want to go back in time and correct our mistakes. A good organization, or a good IT strategy when it comes to security, is to have individuals who make it seem seamless, who minimize the breaches, who minimize the and it's their job to think about this all the time, because new threats come up all the time, and so it's an arms race. Whereas threats continually change and increase, so does our security strategy. All right. I hope this was helpful. I think this last slide is intended to be helpful in the way that you think about security. Let me know if you have any questions.